Hi everyone. I was following the events in Hong Kong, well, at least on the news and stuff. Well, um, I noticed a few things that I want to comment on. It's actually perfectly obvious, but sometimes, as we say here in Germany, sometimes you don't see the forest because of all the trees. Meaning that, sometimes when you're in a situation, it's more difficult for you to assess it. When you're a bit removed from it, like, the events are in Hong Kong and you are here in Germany, and you have an outsider's perspective, but sometimes that's a good thing. Because I noticed some things and I want to share it with you. Um, yeah, let's look at this footage. I'll explain it in a second. Um, okay, uh, gonna switch off the sound. Okay. So what is happening here? This is inside the Legislative Council in Hong Kong, basically the government building or a government building, a rather important one. I don't I don't really know much about Hong Kong, so I'm just, you know, um, for the details, don't rely on me, rely on the news. But there are some things that the news media didn't notice, and I want to talk about that. So anyway, um, this whole thing started, with the extradition bill. Hong Kong was going to basically extradite everyone that commits a crime to China. And of course, the Hong Kong people were not very happy about that because in China, pretty much anyone can be sent to prison or even worse for pretty much anything and for disagreeing with the government. And they were afraid that that was going to happen in Hong Kong, that they just gonna crack down on any dissent and send anyone who opposes them to China to disappear in some labor camp or black jail and so on. So yeah, they were the people in Hong Kong didn't like that very much, and they expressed that uh, uh, by protesting against that in the millions. There were um, a few days ago. There were millions of people on the street in Hong Kong protesting against that. And yeah, but the government kind of responded, but it actually kind of responded with violence. And they were attacking the protesters. They were using rubber bullets against the protesters, even though they were totally peaceful, at least initially. Um, and yeah, and they were using tear gas against the protesters, even though it was completely peaceful at that point. And yeah, so initially the police responded with violence. That was a few days ago. Then they realized, well, the violence doesn't really work. So then they kind of tried to make concessions, but they were just like saying, okay, we like maybe gonna suspend the bill for a little while, and obviously that wasn't enough. The protesters weren't happy with that. They were, they wanted that bill completely removed, and wanted the people responsible for that bill out of office. Yeah. Then the government in Hong Kong kind of responded by, well, vaguely hinting at the fact that, well, nothing is gonna happen, and they're not gonna do anything, and the bill is gonna come, and the protesters can't do anything about it, except maybe if they go to, they were kind of hinting at them going to the government building. I get the impression that they really wanted them to go to the government building. So they did that. And of course, that's when it turned ugly. And that's what you're seeing here. Um, well, it's kind of difficult. On the one hand, of course, they were saying, well, don't go to the government building, but kind of, 101 reverse psychology, like, well, on the one hand, they were kind of hinting at it. On the other hand, they were saying, like, no, don't ever go to the government building. Just don't do that. Do anything, but don't do that. And of course, it had the effect of people going to the government building, which I think is exactly what they wanted, what the Hong Kong government wanted. It's what I want to explain here is how the Hong Kong government is dealing with this issue, or actually it's the Chinese government that's behind it, how they're dealing with this issue and how they're trying to resolve their little problem in Hong Kong and the people in Hong Kong not being happy about basically being governed by the Chinese Communist Party now. So they have a way to resolve that issue with the protesters, and that's what they're doing here. So so it resulted in all the protesters showing up at the government place. Now we're inside the government place. There were windows on the other side, and they lowered a kind of, as you can see, they have they lowered a kind of steel barrier. So the protesters are breaking the windows on the other side, which you can't see because of the steel barrier. And then they're also bending the steel barrier. And inside you have all these riot policemen, and you have a ton of people from the press, which is very nice of the police to let so many people from the press inside the building. You can see in a second how many press people there actually are. In the past, when the press was filming the police was oftentimes attacking even the press and smashing the cameras. But here they invited so many press people, which I think is really nice of the Hong Kong government to do. Yeah. So and maybe you saw that. I wasn't quite sure, but it looked to me like it was actually the protesters firing tear gas inside the building at the police, not the police firing tear gas at the protesters. At least it looked that way. Yeah. Skip a bit forward, maybe. Yeah, well, maybe the police fired tear gas and the protesters just throw the tear gas canisters back in, but it didn't look that way. It really looked like the protesters were throwing tear gas inside the building, and the police isn't doing anything at all. They're not firing tear gas back. They're not doing anything. So isn't that weird? A couple of days before they were attacking anyone with tear gas for no reason at all, and now the protesters are attacking them with tear gas and violently smashing the windows, trying to enter the government building, and the police is just standing there not doing anything, and you will see in a second that they're actually just gonna leave. Let's see, can I? And this is kind of what I'm trying to get at. I want to see you. I want to show you how they leave. I hope this doesn't give me any copyright issues, but I just want to show you this because I'm pretty sure you haven't seen this footage, and yeah. Okay, so now that's it. See that? See that? And boom, they're gone. They just leave. Isn't that weird? they just leave, and it's like they want the protesters to take over the building. And now you can see in a second how many they just leave the building. And what's also interesting, and you'll see that in a second, is that they just leave the building and they don't do anything. They didn't do anything. They didn't resist in the tiniest way, they just left. And as you can see, they're even leaving the electricity on. Isn't that nice of them? And in a second, you'll also be able to see that inside their escalators, they're even leaving the escalators on so the protesters can, more easily reach the higher levels of the building. Isn't that nice? Uh, you know, so they don't even cut the power or anything, and they don't resist in the smallest way. So, like I said, it's almost as if they want them to storm the building, uh, so that they can later claim uh, that these are not peaceful protests; these are violent riots, and that's exactly what they claimed. That's actually what they claimed just an hour after this. Just an hour after the police left, they had a spokesperson for the Hong Kong government say that those are violent rioters, and then of course they were saying, and because those are such violent rioters, we now are forced to use force against them. And then of course 1 or 2 hours later, they entered the building again. Now they were willing to use violence. And then they cleared the building again and uh, used violence to clear the building. But it's like they wanted the protesters to take over the building, to storm the building, and wanted all the press there to film that so that they can later claim, oh, the protests turned into violent riots, and now we have to use force, so that they can use force against the protesters without being condemned by the public or by the media, because now they can claim they violently stormed this building, even though they didn't use violence against anybody. Well, they did break the windows though. Yeah. And you see in a second that even the escalators are running. Where is it? You see what a huge building this actually is. So it's not like and the police just completely left. It's not like they retreated, and normally, especially such large buildings, they have what do you call that? Um, um, Panic rooms and stuff like that, and especially if it's a government building, they have they have special tactical rooms for situations like that, and they of course have surveillance cameras, and they do. And so in addition to all the press filming this, they also have surveillance cameras by them, in the building and filming everything. So they can see exactly what is going on, but they're not doing anything, and they completely left the building. They're not even staying in any of the rooms. So it's not a retreat. They just completely left, you know. To then, like an hour later, um, after the protesters and have entered the building, to then an hour later claim, "Oh look, those are violent riots. So we have to do something against those violent rioters." And then they come back after they let them in, basically. They come back and then they use violence against them. Which you won't see in this video, though, because that happened a couple of hours later. So by now the building is empty again, and the police cleared it and used violence to clear the building of the protesters. But it's yeah, like I said, they wanted this to happen so that yeah, and that also gives them now a good excuse to do their little bill to extradite all those evil criminals to mainland China, where they be taught a lesson and a little re-education through labor camp or something. And as you can see, they even, very nice of them, You see how nice the Hong Kong police is. They even left on the escalators. Uh, oh, okay, so they're graffitiing. Yeah. Here. Yeah. All the lights are on, all the escalators are working. Very nice of them. So yeah, it's a trap.